Good morning, everybody. This is Alistair here at HFL in Sydney. Thank you very much for joining us. A couple of people on the call that I know very well, so hello to you guys, and those of you who are connecting with HFL for the first time, a very warm welcome. So as advertised, we'll be spending about half an hour this morning just talking about a survey we've recently conducted into managing up and how well and effectively that's being done. We will be sharing with you the results of the survey, so we'll be sending you this slide deck, for example, shortly after the webinar is finished. We'll also be sending you a couple of other small documents that you might want to send out to your managers and those direct reports that are experiencing difficulty with their managers, which according to our data is quite a high proportion. The easiest way that we've found to do this to try and make it interactive is for you to ask questions through the question function that you should have in front of you on the right hand panel, and it'll pop up and tell me whether or not there are any questions. And I'll try and answer them as I go along. Those of you who've done webinars before will know that I'm locked quietly in a little room on my own, and I'm not getting any response from anyone, so questions are very enthusiastically received at this end. Please fire away, even if it's just to ask how I am or anything, just so I know that you're there. Okay, so let's kick on, get to the data, and then take a look at some of the conclusions that we think we can draw from it. So we're going to be talking about courage today, or lack thereof. We've asked basically lots of questions of this group of people here, direct reports. They've given us quite a lot of data about the behaviours that they see from managers and the behaviours that they would like to see from managers. And the general theme is that there appears to be quite a bit of lack of courage really from this group as far as this group is concerned. And while we're looking at the courage in that relationship, we might also ask ourselves, I guess, through the next half an hour, how much courage is it going to require from us to help these two groups of people work much more proactively together. A very quick intro as to who we are. HFL, a number of you will already know. We are a 20-year-old leadership consulting company. We're focusing entirely on leadership. We've been doing this sort of evidence-based research for about 5 years, and we've just found it intensely useful in terms of sharpening our point of view and our content. And as far as Fastlead is concerned, it's a program that we've been running for a year. It is a reasonably unique structured frontline leader program, which can either add on to frontline leader programs you're already running, or indeed in a couple of our clients' cases they've replaced what they were running with Fastlead. And it's built on group coaching, small group coaching. And Fastlead is really the area that has generated this survey, the Courage Chasm. We've basically done a study on managing up because of the feedback we've been getting from coaching in Fastlead. So what is a Courage Chasm? Now, obviously, we could have used the Courage Gap, but the alliteration wouldn't have worked as well as Courage Chasm, so we've chosen Chasm. Chasm, by the way, by definition, is a very deep gap. And who's saying there is a chasm? Well, these people, our respondents, are saying that these people, their managers, lack courage, and they're saying that they lack courage in these areas, in the way they communicate, in the way they manage performance, and in the way they trust their teams. And for a lot of you on the line today who've been working in this space for a long time, this is not exactly going to be stop the presses, front news. We know that we're grappling with these issues all the time in almost every program we run, almost every coaching session that we run. But there is some, I think, interesting insights about what this group over here think about this that might help us with a few managers, getting them to step across the chasm, as it were. So there is a very, very big productivity opportunity which we're about to demonstrate, I think, for managers and teams and individuals. There's a chance for the managers to build team engagement, build a leadership brand, which is being severely dented by their inaction in a number of these areas. And if only managers really knew just how much their leadership brand was being dented, I think maybe they would step across this chasm a little bit more often. and obviously the main purpose of the role over this side of the chasm is to build performance. And there's an opportunity for the group on the left-hand side to perform, develop, and enjoy what they're doing. So can we help? Well, as a profession, whether we're leadership consultants, HR business partners, I know there's a number of HR business partners online today, and at HFL we regularly feel for you because we know that you're absolutely at the front end of dealing with the sort of consequences of poor management or poor leadership. There are things obviously that we can try and do. We can try and change mindsets, and we can promote action, but quite often we need something new to say to people. A bit like a broken record. So I'm hoping that some of the data that we're presenting today might give you another opportunity to go back and connect with the managers and the direct reports and to build their skills and hopefully enable them to show some courage. So that's the plan. So I've called it the Courage Express. Can we get it into your organisation? Let's see if there's some data here that is of interest to you. So we decided to do this survey because of the feedback we were getting through our group coaching in Fastlead. So in the coaching sessions, we regularly heard that managing up is a major issue, and the relationship with the manager is really a success or failure factor in many of our coaching sessions. And also we included a new topic in Fastlead. Fastlead, by the way, is people get to choose 6 out of 11 topics that they can talk about in their group coaching sessions, a typical cycle of 6 sessions. And out of those 11 topics, the most popular choice of topics was the topic on managing up. So there's definitely something going on there. We see it in workshops all the time where even with senior leaders, we see them avoiding doing a lot of the performance management we would hope. We see it when they do role plays or real plays, and we see it when we hear feedback from appraisals and so on and so forth. You would probably see it out there in your organisation in the sort of disputes that get hospital passed across to HR business partners who are on the line. You'd probably see it in exit interviews. Certainly all the L&D people would be seeing it in all the interviews that they do when they're designing programs. So how did we go about the survey? Well, it's a qualitative survey. It's a very detailed survey. Plenty of free text responses. We really love the free text responses because they really put meat on the bones of the data. We advertised that it was an 8-minute survey, but actually the average response time was 16 minutes. It was executed over the web anonymously. People really did spend some time putting quite a lot of thought into their comments and quite a lot of venom into their comments as well, as you will see. The survey was promoted via HFL Network, clients and contacts. So a number of your organisations online today responded, 1 or 2 people responded. It was also advertised on LinkedIn and so on. The response rate is mostly Australian, 75%, also international. 118 respondents filled in the whole survey. There will be more data for us to look at over the coming months. We're going to execute the same survey in Southeast Asia in April, which in Asia the managing up relationship is subtly different, so that will be interesting to see that data. And 2 clients have signed on to execute it internally. That's where they'll run the survey internally, and then we'll give them analyse the data to see whether there's any differences between the managing up relationships in their organisation and the general data that we're presenting to you today. And if anybody else is interested in doing that, please let me know. And please let me know quickly because we're about to start on that soon. So the data set will grow. Data is analysed by us, and the conclusions are drawn by the whole of the HFL consulting team. So portrait of the respondents. Who are they? So there's quite a large variety. We started off this survey imagining it would be a survey of frontline leaders, but in the end, almost over 60% actually were either general managers or middle managers. Only 19% of the respondents were frontline leaders. And 20% of response were not leaders at all. So in other words, they literally are just direct reports and don't have any managerial responsibilities down. So we ended up with quite a senior cohort actually responding to the survey, which is interesting in its own right. And if they're all spending 16 or 17 minutes responding, it gives us a good sense of this is not just a frontline leader issue, it's an issue for everybody. We're very interested at the moment at HFL in reporting lines. We're doing quite a lot of work on working in matrix organisations. It's a major need for a lot of our clients, and so we were interested to ask, what do their reporting lines look like. 62% still have a very simple binary reporting structure, which is reporting to one manager. 22% have a dotted line to somebody else as well as their main manager, and 15% are lucky enough to report to more than one manager. I say lucky enough, I'm probably joking there. And you can see that there's almost 40% are now in that space where they have complex relationships, and we think that's probably likely to grow. I haven't been asked any questions yet, so please, there's a huge prize for the first question. Longevity of reporting relationships. So we asked how long they've been reporting to their current manager, and indeed in all of this data we asked them to talk about the extent to which these statements that we're asking them to comment on are to do with their existing manager. We did ask a question later on whether or not the comments they'd made about their existing manager were typical, and in the majority of cases, unfortunately, they were, as you can see from the data. So 41% of the respondent base have been working for their manager less than a year, 4 out of every 10. Bearing in mind that there's quite a senior cohort responding, that's quite high. If you add in the people who've been working for less than 1 year to the people who've been working between 1 and 2 years, you get 77%. More than 3/4 of the respondent base have worked for their current leader for less than 2 years. So the insight for managers is you've got on average about 18 months to make them stars. There's high turnover in terms of how long you have them for, and the insight for the reports is that you need to adapt to your manager and learn fast, or if you have a really poor manager, you just need to keep your head down and wait 2 years, and with a bit of luck you'll get a new one. And so what about the respondents' managers? So we're about to give you a bunch of data in relation to what this relationship is like. So our respondent base, who are their managers? 41% of our respondent base managers are CEO or member of the executive team. Bearing in mind that the majority of the respondent base is from quite large organisations, so this is quite a senior cohort. 30% are general managers, so over 70% of the people being commented on have been leading for some time, and there might be a reasonable expectation that they have by now got reasonably good at it. Unfortunately, the data doesn't support that hypothesis. 25% are middle managers or frontline leaders, and you can see that in the end, the number of frontline leaders reporting here is quite low. So senior leadership group is being commented on. So what does the relationship actually look like? So first up, we asked some questions about satisfaction. And we asked the respondent base to give us a sense of how satisfied they were with their manager in the following 6 areas. Were they satisfied that the manager has set real good clarity around goals? Were the goals achievable? Did the manager believe that regular performance meetings are a priority? Does the manager contribute to your development? Does the manager understand the pressure and issues in your role? And does the manager support you in your role? And we gave them an opportunity to rate these 6 areas from very satisfied all the way down to very unsatisfied. Overall, there was a 50% satisfaction rate. That is to say, if you take all 6 of them together and add all of the pieces together, 50%, which is this orange piece here. So anything, all of the little pie charts that we're about to show you, anything that's orange is good, anything that's brown is bad, and anything that's clear like this is undecided or not sure. So you can see that 14% were not sure whether they're satisfied or not, and 34% were sure that they weren't satisfied. So let's break those down in some detail. The first one was clarity around goals. So you can see that 62% of the respondent base were satisfied that their managers have been clear about what their goals and their role were. 29% not. So almost a third, if you take into account those who are not sure whether they're satisfied or not, almost a third aren't really clear about their goals. Not a brilliant statistic. When we come to satisfied with the achievability of the goals, you'll see that 51% are satisfied that the goals that they've been set by their managers are achievable. Face value, that sounds terrific until you realise that 49% are not satisfied or unsure that their goals are achievable. all of us as HR business partners and L&D managers will know, if there is a question mark about whether the goals are achievable or not, the likelihood of those goals being achieved drops like a stone. So quite a concerning statistic. And we asked about support in role. You can see that 30% are feel they're not supported. Nearly half, again, are not supported. 55% are satisfied with their support. So 4 out of every 10 direct reports don't have clarity on their goals, and half the respondents aren't sure whether their goals are achievable. So a quarter are sure they're not, and 1/3 are unsatisfied with manager support. Not a glowing report card so far. What about the other two? 42% said that they were satisfied that their managers considered performance meetings a priority. Let me just say that again. 42% were satisfied that their managers perceived performance meetings are considered a priority. And you can see that in the brown piece here, 43% are not satisfied that they think their managers perceive performance meetings are a priority. And then there's another chunk that are unsure. Really quite remarkable that you would imagine there are leaders out there who don't consider performance meetings are important. And to what extent were our respondent base happy with and satisfied with their manager's contribution to their learning and development? Well, almost half of the sample were not satisfied. Another chunk were, about 15% or so, were unsure, and only 36% were satisfied. And 51% were satisfied that their manager understands their role and the pressures in their role. 31% are not, and the other aren't sure. So again, you know, we're running at about half of the population, the respondent base, are satisfied with their managers here, and half are not. Excuse me. And obviously this one here would be no surprise to an enormous number of us on this call, because we spend so much time trying to make sure that whenever we are running some sort of a program, we're trying to involve the managers in that program in some way to make sure that they support the learning when the participants of our programs get back to the workplace. You know, it's an uphill battle for all of us on a constant basis. What we thought would be fun was to have a look and say, well, what do we think? If we go back to the previous slide here, which is satisfied with clarity of goals, satisfied with achievability of goals, satisfied with support, what would a really high-performing workplace look like if the relationship, the managing up relationship, was really excellent, and the manager and the direct report were really on the same page, and we're working very proactively together and producing a high-performing workplace? What sort of percentages might we expect? And internally we came up with, first and foremost, 95% on the first one. If a member of staff isn't clear about their goals, then you know that's a very poor piece of management indeed. So we, in a high-performing area, we would say 95% should be there. There will always be people who don't, you know, will imagine they can't really achieve their goals. They're glass half empty rather than glass half full. But you'd expect, if it's been talked about properly, and if the managers are working the problem with the direct reports and sitting down and being very proactive about how we're now going to get these goals, that 75% in a high-performing workplace would believe that the goals are achievable. And we'd also think that 75% of the respondent base should be saying, you know, my boss understands my role, understands what I have to do, understands the pressure I'm under, and is, you know, is supportive in that area. So there's a huge gap between these figures in grey here and the actual figures that our respondent base are telling us are on the ground here. And you could even describe it indeed, as the graphic says, as a chasm, and it's a great opportunity, a huge productivity opportunity, if the managers can start doing these sorts of things a bit better with their direct reports. And we've added a few percentages on the next one as well. You know, we'd said 95% ought to be working for a manager who believes that performance meetings are important, and so on. So I'd be interested in any comments that you've got. You're very welcome to make comments as well as questions if you think we've got those right. So bearing in mind that this is a senior group that we're talking about, so our respondent base are reporting on quite senior people. If we can get the senior group to pick up their performance in this area, there's a real chance to cascade that sort of behaviour down the organisation, because clearly middle managers who are not being managed properly are unlikely to feel the need to manage further down in the same way. So next up was performance management. You can imagine this one was an important area for us to ask questions about. We asked about the frequency of formal performance discussions, the frequency of informal performance discussions, and how often you would like to have performance discussions. And we didn't define in any way the difference between formal and informal. We just asked the respondents to respond and tell us how often they did it. We didn't offer them a definition. And you can see they can choose between weekly or fortnightly all the way up to never. So formal performance discussions first. 29% of the respondent base have formal performance discussions quarterly or more often, and 71% don't. This was a little surprise to us. We imagined that actually this percentage would be smaller because most of our clients would do formal performance reviews on a 6-monthly basis and a 12-monthly basis. So there are a third of respondents out there who are having those conversations. We asked the question around formal performance, how often would you like to have them? And 69%, so almost 7 out of every 10, would like them to have them quarterly or more often, and 27% not. So this for me is one of the key first insights around this data that might help us build the courage capability in managers. They are being told, according to our respondent base, that their direct reports, far from wanting less formal performance feedback, they want more formal performance feedback. And I suppose as HR business partners and L&D managers and leadership consultants, we know that most direct reports actually want to know how well they're doing, and they particularly want to know if they're not doing well. And they expect to be told, however unpalatable it might be to start off with. Most particularly in a modern workplace, people want to know that they're doing well and how they can do better, and they get quite upset if they're not getting that sort of feedback. And I think a lot of managers don't realise that. A lot of managers have gone through their lives not really wanting any formal feedback, and so they assume that the modern workplace is the same. It's not. This is a wow factor. There's really end of excuse time for not doing these performance reviews. I know that a lot of you on the call will spend lots of time getting managers kicking and screaming to come into the performance review system and actually do the annual reports, and it's doing them because HR told us to. This sort of data suggests that the reason they should be doing them is nothing to do with HR. They should be doing them because their direct reports are demanding and insisting that they want some feedback. How about informal performance discussions? Well, you can imagine a lot more often, these occur a lot more often. 59% say they get informal feedback quarterly or not. 88% would like informal feedback more regularly. 10% wouldn't. So again, a huge please give us more feedback message. Astonishingly, 25% of the respondent base said they never got informal feedback from their manager. So the task for all of us is to find out who those 25% of managers are and see if you can manage them across to the competitor in some way. So most managers are poor at providing feedback, and their reports want more. So we've known, I think, as a group, that first statement. The second statement, I think, is probably news for some of the managers out there. Okay, so let's take a look at the portrait of the relationship via development. And again, there'll be no surprises for most of the people on the call here today. So overall, we asked them whether or not their managers coached or mentored them very often or always, and 10%, this little slice here, said yes, very often, always, I get coached and mentored by my managers. 38% said occasionally or sometimes, which is this white piece here, and 52%, more than half of the respondent base, said they rarely or never got coached or mentored by their managers. I'm just getting a question from somebody who's obviously sort of joined a little bit later about whether you'll be getting the slides, and yes, you certainly will do. We'll be sending you the slides later on, either today or tomorrow, to everybody who's attended the webinar. So 10% said they got some coaching or mentoring. 36% said that their managers acknowledge their strengths very often or always, which is this piece here. 38% occasionally, which is the white piece, and 26% said rarely or never did their managers acknowledge their strengths. And as far as weakness is concerned, even less regular are weaknesses pointed out. So only 16% said they pointed out weaknesses often or always. 43% said occasionally or sometimes. 41% said rarely or never. And again, if we just go through the process here of taking a look at what maybe the a good setting would be. You would expect 50% of managers to coach or mentor them very often, I would have thought, and maybe the rest occasionally or sometimes. You would expect 80% of managers to be able to find it within themselves to occasionally acknowledge the strengths of their direct reports. I mean, how difficult can it be? And as far as this last one, which is pointing out weaknesses, I put DOS here, which stands for depends on skills, because we'll have all been in a situation where we've seen people who have pointed out very negatively the weaknesses or mistakes that people are making, and have done so in a way that's demotivational and decreases performance rather than increases performance. So if they've got skills, then obviously we would be hoping to see that percentage to be much higher. So a huge chasm in performance in this area of development, and as again most of us on the call will know, in the changing workplace that most of our senior managers now operate in, this is quite a senior cohort, as we've discussed. They may not feel that this sort of stuff is important for employees, and they're lucky to get whatever development that the senior manager deigns to give them. But the truth is, in a modern workplace, if direct reports are working for managers who are not developing them and don't appear to be interested in developing them, then the most talented of those people will leave the company and find a manager to work for who will develop them. So there's a huge opportunity here, and there's a massive chasm. It's end of excuse time. They need to do something about it. So I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Advice without consequences. We asked them a question, the respondents a question. If you could say 3 things to your manager without fear of consequences, what would they be? This is really advice from direct reports. We should say here, the first thing that I did was we put them into 3 categories to say, were the comments that people made positive, were they neutral, or were they negative? And we ended up with well over 300 individual text-written comments. And if you just take 2 seconds to contemplate what you think the percentage under the smiley face is going to look like, we need to acknowledge that the question was asked in such a way that you're likely to get more negative responses than positive ones, because it's without consequences, so it kind of implies some criticism. I nevertheless wasn't quite expected to only have 4% of the responses positive, 26% neutral, and overall 70% were negative. So when we clustered all of these comments together, what did we end up with? And we ended up with 2 or 3 or 4 major themes coming out of the data. The first thing that people would like to say to their managers without fear of consequences is, please improve your communication. 60%, so 6 out of every 10 respondents mentioned communication as a key area for managerial improvement. Try listening, recognize employees through positive feedback, be more approachable, more face-to-face meetings. The negative ones are, I don't like the way you speak down to me and assume the worst. Don't just talk to me when there is a problem. Tell us what you're working on the issues, share the burden. Keep me in the loop is a very, very consistent one all the way through. And then you get down to the ones that are very critical indeed, and this is one of the nicer critical ones. You're a truly terrible communicator. There were a few there that unfortunately you can't put into a slide deck in this sort of professional company. But you can imagine, I'm sure, what they say, and you'll have all had some experience, I should think, of people saying these things to you. So I think in a lot of the areas that where people are commenting, we see a sort of a continuum, if you like. They start off with comments being, sounding disappointed. They then move up to the disgust category, and then they move up to the desperation category, which is where people really want this done better because it's affecting their performance and it's affecting their career. So the next one was lead me. So when we clustered them all together, the first one was communication. The second was please lead me better. Be open with goals, stop being so negative, be consistent, practice what you supposedly teach or preach. Came up quite a bit. It's that classic modeling of behavior as opposed to just telling people to do things. There was quite a lot of stuff about get out of the weeds and be more strategic. And then we get into the more negative ones. My personal favourite is someone just answering really as a thing they wanted to say without any consequences to their manager. Next one up was predictably manage performance. So they want managers to manage performance much better. And again, this for me is the second piece where we've got a very clear message that may help us build the courage in our manager cohort. So there's a very clear message from the respondents here is they want to be managed their own performance better. You'll see be courageous and talk about my own performance. But there were a number of comments around where you see here you need to address problem employees quicker, you need to manage performance more quickly. There was definitely a feeling that there are non-performers on the team and you're not dealing with them. Why not? That's what you get paid for. So that came through, I think, relatively clearly. So 1/3 of respondents believe their managers don't manage performance effectively, and it really irritates them. And so there's a lot of damage being done to leadership brand here. And I think if managers understood this, they would feel that they really have permission to get on with things. I think this is the last one I've mentioned in this area. 28% said they want their managers to develop them. That really links in with the data that we saw earlier on. And we asked some generic questions after these ones to say, what are the biggest challenges? If you had to just name one challenge, what would it be? Leadership style of my manager was the top one. Half of respondents mentioned this. Poor communication, so again, a theme coming up. Getting time with my manager, 1/3 of respondents mentioned that as being really one of the biggest challenges, and 25% that clarity of performance. So you can see there's a reasonably consistent theme. We asked a series of questions, a lot of the same topics in different ways, and thematically all of these things came up. So finally, the last piece that we asked them about is which improvement tactics work. So we gave them 5 improvement tactics: better understanding of managers' KPIs, candid feedback to the managers, adjusting your style to match the manager's style, openly communicating about workload and pressures, ensuring clarity about my manager's expectations and my expectations. So these were the improvement tactics. We asked them, have you tried it or not, and was it successful? Yes, it's successful. Was it partially successful or not successful? And so which ones worked? Well, it's patchy performance. In terms of the KPIs, understanding the manager's KPIs, 75% of respondents say they've tried this tactic. 56% said it worked. A smaller chunk here said that it partially worked. Some were not sure, and quite a few said it didn't work. When it came to providing managers with candid feedback, 76% bravely attempted this particular tactic. 45% said it was successful, and roughly the same sort of percentage said it wasn't, as you can see. And when it came to adjusting their approach to match their manager's work style, 95% of respondents attempted this tactic, and it was easily the most successful. You can see there that about 75% of the respondent base, if you add successful and partially successful together, were reporting success. So clearly that one seems to work. The other 2 are openly communicating about current workload. It's about 50-50 there, 77% assume the tactic. And this concept of saying, what do you expect from me, and then I'll tell you what I expect from you. Again, about half of the people say that they found it successful, fully successful. Quite a few attempted it. So adopting the right tactic can improve the relationship with success is patchy. Adjusting style to match their managers seemed to work best for most respondents. Candid feedback and explaining what I expect are the least successful tactics, but still work in about half the cases. So if you've got the courage to do it and you do it diplomatically, perhaps that's something you can look at. Okay, so what are our conclusions about this? Well, I've mentioned a couple of the conclusions on the way through. So the first conclusion clearly is that managers lack the courage to communicate fearlessly. And They lack the skills and the will to tell it like it is. They put off bad news and difficult feedback, believing they are avoiding conflict and dislike. And the way that this group looks at it is that they want an open and honest environment. They report they feel ignored, kept in the dark, disenfranchised and disrespected when they're not being communicated with. And indeed, poor communication generates the very thing that managers are trying to avoid, which is dislike and contempt. So the message is, if you want to be liked, respected, avoid conflict and have a high-performing team, then you really need to communicate. The second one is about managing performance, and this is the courage to manage performance. It'll be very familiar to most of us, but the big message here is that this group here want managers to manage performance more robustly. They want it to be fair and to be properly done and diplomatically, but they want robust feedback. Current settings are managers are avoiding difficult conversations, non-performers are allowed to stay, and this irritates participants more probably than anything else. Negative feedback is rare, even positive feedback is sporadic, and goals are not properly defined. So you can imagine an environment where those sorts of things are occurring. What happens over here is a lack of respect, major damage to leadership brand, and managers have created fear of feedback zones, and it impacts very negatively on them. So if they want to avoid conflict and drive high performance, then they need to be tough but fair in managing performance. The third major conclusion really from this data is that managers lack the courage to trust and develop people. One of the pieces of data I haven't presented because it turned up as a sort of fourth or fifth priority in a lot of these areas is that micromanagement really is quite rife in this relationship very often. And that micromanagement really is perceived by the direct reports as a pure lack of trust. There's a lot of comments around, let me get on with my job, let me do my job, help me do my job better. Why are you constantly checking in with me? You need to give me some trust, you need to give me some belief, you need to let me do the job that you hired me to do, and you need to help me get better at it. So there's virtually no development or delegation occurring, and as we would all know as HR business partners and L&D professionals, that means that top talent leaves. The sense that people leave managers, not companies, I think is really strongly supported by this data. And the managers are having the relationship dominated by fear of mistakes and failure and mistrust. And remember, this is a very senior cohort we're talking about. And the direct reports feel trapped working for a manager who won't let go or trust them. They feel devalued, disengaged, stagnant. They believe their managers don't care about them. Discretionary effort is low. So the message really for managers, if you want to be held as a major corporate success, then you need to trust your team and help them grow. And in fact, they really insist on it. So do they have the courage to change mindset? I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. Senior leaders need to change their mindset about having the courage to do things. And the direct reports need to acknowledge that managers are on a bit of a journey, particularly senior leaders that are on a journey. So I think the overall message of the data that we have here is, according to the responses to this survey, direct reports will happily give managers clear permission to be more courageous. And in fact, they insist upon it. So all of the things that the managers are believing will upset their direct reports are actually the inaction in those areas is the thing that's actually upsetting direct reports, according to this qualitative survey. Okay, so can we help? Well, maybe there's some data in here that will help from a changing mindset point of view. Obviously, promoting the sort of actions is, putting this data back into managers and making them think about it. Obviously, our responsibility as a cohort is to help build the skills to do it and skills to show courage. And I might say, from a starting point of view, we're talking about a very senior cohort here. So changing attitudes and mindsets in senior cohorts, as most of us will know, is very, very hard. But there is a very, very good place to start in building the sort of performance culture that most direct reports are saying that they want. If you think about where can you shape mindsets easily, where can you build skills, you've got a cohort that really want to learn. Where can you start shaping talent really early? Where can you help them show courage and they're prepared to do so very quickly? Where can you help them create networks and what have you? And our view at HFL is, while lots of work needs to be done at a senior level in most of our organisations, a place where you get very high ROI is on the front line. You can train all of this stuff in on the front line very quickly and establish, because they don't have all these negative behaviours, already there. They're looking for the right behaviours, and it's one of the things that we really work very hard in relation to Fastly. So that is the end of the formal presentation, and we've got 20 people on the line, so thank you very much for staying with me that long. I'm very grateful for your time, and I guess the question is, do you have any questions about the data, or indeed any comments? I'll let the silence do the lifting for a little while. Okay, so I have got another question here. Thank you. In fact, I've got a third question, which is, I should have mentioned earlier on, if you're going to ask questions, if you could ask easy ones, that would be fantastic. The question is, how do we train in courage? It's a great question. It's a great question. I guess one of the things, because we discussed this just the other day, because we asked a similar sort of question in one of the previous webinars. Training in courage to someone is something that's very difficult to do, but you can certainly train in situational courage. So there are a number of situations here where we've described managers avoiding giving negative feedback, avoiding clarifying goals, avoiding having difficult conversations, avoiding giving feedback on a regular basis, avoiding being very transparent in their communication, if there are problems and what have you, communicating about them. All of those things require situational courage, and I think it's very possible for us as a cohort to tease out with the managers who are avoiding doing those things because they think that it'll upset the direct reports. Actually, the very fact that they're not doing those things is. So I think it is possible to build situational courage. With a lot of these role plays that you build into leadership programs and what have you, you can create a situation where the manager's avoiding saying X or doing Y or saying Z because they're worried about upsetting the direct report, and then you can tease out through that role play that actually the direct report really benefits from that direct feedback, and in fact not giving them the direct feedback ends up with a negative long-term performance. So thank you very much for that question. There aren't any others at this stage of the game, so I might sign off at this point, 42 minutes in. Thank you very, very much indeed for your attention. If you want to learn more about Fastly, please take a look at our website. By the way, there's quite a lot of blogs here and a leadership library that you can send your frontline leaders to, so there's a lot of work that we've put into this website in terms of it being a support, whether or not someone's actually on the program, on the Fastly program or not. There's a picture here of Peter Helft, who runs the program for us from a sales point of view. He would love to hear from you if you're interested. We'll be sending out all of the information about this in the next couple of days. If you've got any questions at all about the data, please come back to me. If you're interested in running the survey inside your own organisation, we're happy to do that free of charge because we're very keen to build our data bank. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time today, and I hope you found this useful. Please give us some feedback, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you very much.